Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel on productive screen time. I am so excited to be your moderator. My name is Mercedes Samudio. I am a parent coach and licensed clinical social worker with my business, The Parenting Skill. And I'm going to allow all of our panelists to kind of introduce themselves and let you know a little bit more about them. So,
I'm Karen Rich, and I'm an autism specialist and teach college lifespan development. And I get to sometimes buy assistive technology equipment.
I'm Dr. Tracy Bennett. I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice. I also teach addiction studies at Cal State University Channel Islands. I'm a mother of 3. And I have Get Kids Internet Safe Parenting.
Good afternoon, my name is Bernadette Lucas. I'm the Director of Technology for the Beverly Hills Unified School District. My assignment before this was Director of Technology for the Los Angeles Unified School District, and I was the principal of a math science technology school with a one-to-one 24/7 program.
My name is Lori Getz. I am an Internet Safety, Security, and Ethics Specialist, and I get to travel all over the country talking about how much I love technology and all the wonderful things that we can do with it. I'm also a parent of 2 girls, and I'm very happy to be here today.
My name is Alexandria Bromyan. I'm the content director of a company called Forcefield. We develop parental monitoring software, and I'm on this panel because in addition to blocking mature and inappropriate content, we also deliver a library of amazing websites and app recommendations with the download. So it's less about blocking the kid and more about inviting them into great content.
awesome. So, you guys, we have a wealth of knowledge here, right? I'm excited. So, I guess we can start with the idea of what actually is productive screen time, because I know that all of us have screens, all of us have, access to them, and we tend to go into them when we're bored or standing in line somewhere. So let's maybe have some of you guys talk to us about what your philosophy is on what productive screen time actually means.
Productive screen time for my population on the autism spectrum is it's instructional. So that may mean that devices connected to the screen pull up instruction and programming that those children need.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to be on this panel because, to be honest, I'm usually talking about screen risk and how to prevent screen risk. But the truth is I also present about screen benefit, and as a university professor, the world of education has changed dramatically with screen use. Our students are on multiple screens at a time. I'm on multiple screens at a time. They say you teach what you most need to learn, so that tells you a little bit about me. And also I've watched, I have a 22-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And raising my 22-year-old was very different than raising my 12-year-old. Just in 10 years, things have changed dramatically. And the truth is, although I talk a lot about risk and preventing risk, and I treat clients that have run into serious trouble, I'm very pro screen media use, not just for education, but also for entertainment and socialization. There are a lot of pro-social things that happen online, especially if the kids have a good connection with their parents, if the parents were wise in setting up a good structure from the beginning, and if they're responsive. I mean, the truth is all children get into trouble and all children benefit. So it's really important for us to talk, I think, about how to guide them in the right direction, and then how to be forgiving when they do experiment and make mistakes, because they all will. And if we overreact and yank away their privileges, I think we lose a great learning opportunity, or teaching and learning opportunity.
Absolutely. When I think of productive screen time, I think about purpose. One of the things I talk to parents and my students about is what is the purpose of using the technology? Oftentimes it's instructional, you're using it to learn, be it for school or for entertainment. But that conversation around the reason why you're using it and how does that connect to your goals as a learner and as someone who does want to be entertained, that's an important conversation so kids can learn how to make choices when adults are not around.
I think it's interesting that we're talking about adults and children, because oftentimes we hear a lot from the kids, that's not fair. And that's one of my favorite things to talk about, because fair doesn't mean equal, it means everyone gets what they need. And to me, that's what productive screen time is all about, that everyone gets what they need. We've got access to information, communication, games and entertainment, and shopping. And there's nothing wrong with doing these things when the time and place calls for it. It's a matter of finding a balanced approach so that we can all live in a space in this digital realm where it's to our benefit and not to our detriment. So I don't necessarily know that there's a single answer, as you've already heard on this panel, of when we should use technology and when we shouldn't. I guess we should use technology when we have the opportunity and the need and the time, and not when we're in the middle of a face-to-face conversation with somebody else and interrupt ourselves talking via text. So.
We have tried to create a library that has the best educational websites and apps. And a lot of parents, myself included, we look at apps and we look at websites and we think, is this educational or is this entertainment? And we only want the educational stuff and we don't want the entertainment stuff. But there's a much, I think, more productive way if you want to sort of separate higher quality from lower quality apps, and it's not educational versus entertainment, because you can have entertainment apps that are amazingly educational, and you can have educational apps that are really dumb. So what I like to look at is that there's another way to look at it. You can say, are these creativity apps and websites, or are these just pure passive consumption? And I think that really clears the path, at least in my own personal life with my kids. I have a son who loves Minecraft, and I think, oh no, too many hours on Minecraft, you should be doing something more educational. If you really look at it, it's an amazing app. He plays it with his friends. They never shut up the whole time. They're talking, they're all on their screen, yes, and it's the loudest group of 10-year-olds you've ever heard in your life. It's amazingly stimulating. So that has sort of opened my eyes to look at it, not just say, oh, it's educational, great, there's 80,000 educational apps in the App Store. A very small percentage are truly educational and creative. So I think for me and for our product, that's become a more useful way to look at what's out there.
I love that, and I think that Lori said something that was really valuable, which is just with that one question, you can see that there's such a variety in how we use screen time in our lives and how we kind of conceptualize the idea of screen time. So I kind of want to shift this idea to, I know that there are a lot of schools now that are using screens as part of their educational environment, whether it be in the actual classroom or as part of homework and in their further instruction. So I'd like to ask the panel, how do we navigate that idea that kids are going to be having screens, whether that person, the parent doesn't really want that screen in the home yet, they haven't wanted screens, they're not ready for it, but the school is saying, here's a Chromebook, here's an iPad, they have to do their homework on it. How do we help keep our kids safe when we haven't asked for that into our homes, or we have, but we don't know how to do it?
I would love to take that piece in regard to multitasking. Okay, so multitasking, from the way I'm using it, is when you have more than one screen going at a time. Which is what everybody does. All right, so you're writing a paper, you're listening to music, and you're checking your social media on the side. So I did a really deep research dive trying to decide how good that is for our brains and how much I should stop my kids from doing it / me from doing it. And what I found was very interesting. It turns out that 2% of the population are what we call super taskers. I don't know if you guys know about super taskers, but these are people who can actually multitask efficiently with good achievement and without becoming irritable and exhausted because of it. I'm convinced I'm a super tasker. But here's the thing. The other 98% are also convinced they're super taskers. Because with your multitasking, you lose touch with your performance. You think you're doing a great job when you actually aren't. And there's a couple things that happen with multitasking. One is if you're using the same cognitive resources for both tasks, then they actually do compete with each other, and your performance declines on the average of a half a letter grade. The other thing that happens if you're multitasking is you burn your brain fuel much more quickly. Oxygenated glucose is our brain fuel, and when you're fracturing your attention, when you're pulling your attention from one thing to another and toggling back and forth, you burn out far more quickly and you're unable to maintain the resilience to finish the task. So in regard to that, in regard to education and homework and studying, I did want to communicate a takeaway that if a child's listening to classical music, or an adult, to classical music and doing a task, those aren't competing cognitive resources. So those are actually beneficial as multitasking activities. But if they're watching television and they're going over their notes, that can very much interfere, because when you watch TV, you encode memories as a working memory, like processing, like driving a car. When you look at facts, you encode in your hippocampus. And the retrieval of those two types of memories are very different. So if you have a child who's studying for a test in front of the TV, they're actually encoding their memories in the wrong part of their brain in a way where retrieval is going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
It's why they study for a test, do well, and 3 days later, they don't remember any of the material.
Exactly.
That's what's happening. It hits the prefrontal cortex, it falls out, it goes away forever. It's never encoded to the hippocampus, you're right. I think, though, that there's also an onus on the schools to start paying a little bit more attention to what they're asking of the students and how much time. One of my biggest concerns with technology in education is not that technology is beneficial in education. I strongly, strongly believe that. But I'm looking at all of you right now and how you're all sitting at your devices, and I'm very worried for your posture and your hands and your eyes and your neck and your wrists and your backs. I don't think that one of the things we've taken into consideration well enough is the ergonomics and the health issues related to all of us using these devices all day long in the classroom. I'm a huge fan of having technology in schools, but we have to do it in a way where we're teaching our students every 15 minutes, look away from that device and make sure that you're actually sitting with your feet flat on the floor. If I could get all of you portable ergonomic workstations, I would, because what you're actually doing here is you're causing there to be stress on your spine as you are looking down. For every inch you look down, that's approximately 10 pounds of pressure on your spine. And so now think about our children who are, I know as all of you sit up, I'm only 5 feet tall, but I have excellent posture, so I look much taller. But here we have these young students that were in elementary and middle and high school whose bones and muscles are still developing. So we really need to be cognizant of, if we are going to create an enriched technology environment for them, that we also take into consideration the health of their bodies.
When I was principal, we were having this conversation with parents around homework looking differently than it did when we were all coming up. It was a really fascinating conversation, and you'll hear a theme throughout my remarks around purpose. So when the technology went home with our students, it was, why is it going home, and how are the kids using it? These critical questions to ask. We didn't send it home for sitting home technology's sake. There was a task that the kids had to complete that required redefinition for those of us familiar with SAMR. We rarely sent the technology home for substitution. The cognitive tasks had to be enhanced with the technology. We would also make sure that parent education was part of any kind of cultural transformation with homework. Homework should look differently if your school is engaged in an instructional technology initiative. And when that homework goes home, parents should see a different level, almost a magical dimension to learning that is only enabled with the technology. And if you're doing those kind of things, if you're thinking through the questions around purpose, then some of these other challenges won't come up because you're using it deliberately, not just for the sake of using it. In addition to that, parents being engaged with the homework that's going home. So as an educator, as educators, my teachers would embed or try to embed components where the parents had to engage with their children with the homework. So our parents were learning as our kids were learning. And that transformed the culture at home, and parents were more engaged with the technology in ways that brought about increased learning for the entire family. So we had more parents visiting the website, more parents researching with students. And so again, purpose was emphasized with the technology going home.
Okay, I can go now. Assignments are now put online, and parents have to engage with their kids in order to find out what the assignments are. The Khan Academy in remediation classes, the Khan Academy is used first to measure and monitor progress. Those are important to keep up with the standards of the classroom. Homework looks totally different, as does classwork. Classwork is more, it's balanced technologically and handwritten. So you have a balance in the classroom, and then you expect that balance to be at home. But where's outside play? Going back to the health and wellness of our kids, in the next generation, that's what I fear for, the health and wellness of our children.
It's about finding balance.
Yeah.
It really is. As with everything in life, it's about finding balance. It's about making sure that when the technology does come home, that there's purpose to it, but then the students also know that if they have to go onto the LMS in order to get their assignment, that they don't stay on the LMS or stay on YouTube or stay in Facebook, or they're not using Facebook, sorry, that's for all of us. But that there is that kind of idea of, all right, I've got to get this done. I should probably not be multitasking because I'll spend 3 hours doing it rather than 1. And I need to be outside, and I need to get exercise, and I need to eat well. And so it's all of the components that need to come together, not just a single one that we kind of substitute for another.
And you guys kind of brought up an idea that I was thinking as I was thinking about a question, which is this idea of collaboration with the students and the educators as well as students and parents. And so one thing that I know I've seen or I'm encouraged is that if you're going to go on a hike, people say keep the phones at home, but you can also take it and look up the different trees and different animals. So is there a way that families can really incorporate and collaborate with technology so it doesn't become this burden where everyone's just down in their devices, but when we go out, how can we do that? When we are wanting to engage, we can still use devices. Do you guys have any ideas or ways that we can really collaborate with technology to still bring connection?
I would say, as a mother of 3, so when I started Get Kids Internet Safe, I thought, I mostly produced it for me as a mother, because when I looked out there, there wasn't a lot of balanced tools to use. So I thought with myself and my psychiatrist husband, we could come up with a great program, and we did, and then I used it with my clients, and then I brought it online. What was most surprising to me is what I thought parents needed was tech. I thought we needed monitoring, filtering, and blocking. And we do. But, it turns out that it's really a partnership between tech and your connection with your child, which is what I do for a living. And so when the children do get into trouble, or just to raise a healthy child, you want to have this really strong, fun connection with ongoing dialogue. And one of the ways to do that is with tech. I mean, I can't tell you how often my 12 or my 14-year-old runs into the room to show me a funny video or to show me a fun activity. And I think if we're afraid and we're consequating and punishing them all the time, they're not going to do that. But if they see us as a partner in tech and we use that as a way to connect, it's our best tool to keep them safe and to keep them flourishing in the digital age.
I want to answer to that. I have a 36-year-old who's a systems administrator who has no digital footprint. You can't find him online, you can't do anything, and yet he does text me valuable things. We have this interaction, things that amuse us both. Like he might like a band, so he'll share a YouTube video with me. It's a different generation. He might even share a Snapchat conversation with me, and that's hilarious to me. So there is a balance, and I think that's important in families. And when they get to college, as we were discussing in another group earlier, when they get to college, they have to put their work online. My 31-year-old has every symphony he's ever done or composed. It has to be online as college credit.
One of the, to me, most profound phrases that came from the Federal Office of Technology was around learning or instruction powered by technology. And we can take that same phrase and put it to your question, life powered by technology, not technology powered by life. Yeah. So, for example, at my school, when I was principal, we had a huge gardening initiative. And so the gardening was the task. That was what needed to be powered. So the kids and the teachers would document their gardening experience using technology. Technology did not drive the gardening experience. So in our lives, with our children, with our students, what is the task? What is, again, I love the word purpose. What is your purpose? Is your purpose to communicate to the world what your passion is? And so that passion drives your use of technology, and that will dictate what kind of technology you use to do that. So we start with a human being and let that person's desire power the use of technology.
We have a lure in our hills. Do you know what a lure is? Pokemon Go. So there's a lure that's very close to our house, within like half a mile. And so we went out last Sunday looking for it. So we, as a family, played Pokemon Go for like 2 hours. It was fantastic. So that's, I don't know. For me, it's very different than screen time where you're sitting and watching a movie. You're actually engaged in a game where you're moving, you're getting plenty of vitamin D, you actually are part of it. I don't know, I think it's just, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? We've got to find where it works and where it doesn't. And spending a Sunday afternoon with my kids and my husband playing Pokemon Go, we collected a lot of Pokeballs. It was fun. It was really great.
Pokemon Go was a little bit my insight into meeting my son on a new level as well. He wanted it, I resisted it, we finally went and we started driving around, and it was all about finding landmarks, and I'm passionate about architecture. There were so many things that we had driven past a million times and never noticed, and we were parking the car, getting out, and really engaging on that level. And some other apps that I find amazing. One is that has been around for a while. It's iMovie, and that is an amazing app that everyone from 8-year-olds to 18-year-olds can use, depending on how you can use a small portion of its functionality and really have an amazing experience out of it. That to me would be the quintessential creative app that really provides a tool where kids are working collaboratively. Your gardening example, it's sort of like that. They take an idea, and I've had my kids use it with their friends and have not come back to the house for 3 hours later with their opus. And that is screen time that, as a parent, I feel so great about. And there's really a lot of those kind of apps out there that I just think everyone can get so much out of.
And actually, Dr. Bernadette, you mentioned something that I thought was really interesting, which is we have to get past this idea of monitoring and blocking and things like that. So Alex, as someone who has that app and someone who is using that, why is it so important that we don't just monitor and block only, but that we have other things that our kids can do with something like your monitoring, with something like Force Field?
So the whole concept of blocking sets you up to have a sort of antagonistic relationship with your child and technology. It's, I may trust you, I definitely don't trust what's out there, but furthermore, I don't trust your ability to distinguish between good and bad. Although our product does provide blocking for young kids, which if you have an 8 or 9-year-old and you don't want them to get on questionable YouTube videos, we do provide that. But what we're also really trying to do, our tagline is not this, but we really wanted this for a while. We wanted our tagline to be Force Field, protecting your kids from lame technology. That's what we wanted. We ended up not going with that. But the idea is that we really want to show parents and kids how this is the richness that's out there. And in trying to build this library of websites, it was an interesting process. It took me about a year. There's about 500 websites organized by educational topic and age appropriateness. It's really hard to find good websites. It's really easy to find websites that your kids shouldn't have. That is everywhere. There's no shortage of articles about Kik. But finding the good takes some digging. And I feel like that's something that should be getting much more play and press. And I think that's something when parents and kids are on the same side of technology, you're in a much better position to then talk to your kids about what is not appropriate.
So,
Please. I'm a user of Force Field. And I think the part about the filtering for me is it's great to set expectations. You basically, when you put some sort of parental control software on a device for young children, it sets expectations, but you can't do it in a way where you're not transparent. You can't say to the child, oh, here you go, you can do whatever you want, and then when they get blocked from something, say, oh, I have no idea that happened. I mean, it's really important. It's, the internet, the World Wide Web, it's a community with 1 trillion places to go and 3 billion people there. It's the largest community any of us will ever be a part of. And so by setting certain expectations, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What you have to understand is that if you are setting those expectations, you have to be very transparent about it, and you also have to understand it's not going to stop kids from seeing something you don't want them to see. You know to turn off the filters when you are walking in every 10 minutes and putting in the password to bypass the filters. Time to take them off. They're no longer effective. But by letting your kids know, you don't get to wander this community. And for me, I don't let my kids walk out the front door and not ask them where they're going. So I don't know why we would allow kids to walk out into this community all alone and not ask them where they're going.
So my comments are very much connected to that. As an educator, I think it's crucial that we do monitor where kids go. We know that, and this came up in an earlier panel, but it's something that as an educator, we live in the space all the time. Kids' judgment is not the same as adult judgment, and it's not supposed to be. We talked earlier about brain development and consequences, both negative and positive. So as a principal and teacher and a step parent, when I talk to students and kids about what you have access and what you don't, this transparency piece is crucial. The dialogue, why am I blocking this for you? When might you be old enough to have access to it? And then you explain this, and this comes back to like a metacognitive type of thing for them. So later in life, they ask themselves these same type of questions. So I do think monitoring student privacy and safety, oftentimes they don't have the judgment and or experience to make those calls, but teaching them about it through digital citizenship, Common Sense Media, I think there's no one in the room who's not acutely aware of that resource. Teaching kids to make responsible choices is what I think is absolutely crucial.
I think you bring up I'm so sorry, but I think you bring up a really good point when you talk about privacy. Privacy, when you think about that word itself, privacy means control, right? That's what it means. If whatever you're trying to do, if you whisper to a friend, don't tell anyone, but you're trying to control how far information goes. And so I think that there's certain expectations of privacy we all have. If your child's in the bedroom, you knock on the door from the bathroom, you wait until they come out. But what they don't understand is there's no expectation of privacy online. The minute they put something out there, they give up control over what happens to that thought, that feeling, that special moment in time, or that image. They give control to the companies or the servers, right? The advertisers, the marketers. And then they also give control to the people that they share with. So the idea that our children think that they should have that kind of private space goes completely against what it is that they're doing and that expectation.
So I think you bring up a really good point in general, which is this idea that and when we're talking about productive screen time and how to teach it, how do we talk about that public space that is the internet? I think, again, Josh talked about all the red zone apps earlier, but these ideas that kids think, oh, I put it on there, I deleted it, it's off my phone, no one knows about it anymore. So when we're talking about this idea of being productive with the screens that we use, how do we help our kids to become more aware of what they are privately or publicly putting out into the world, and how can we help them learn how to make better decisions about the things that they share outside of their even I think someone was talking earlier about how like they share, I'm going to share where I'm going to be. For an adult who can take care of themselves, that might be cute, I'm going to be here with my girlfriends. But for a kid that's 11 saying I'm going to be here at this park or whatnot, how do we help our kids learn better about how to share things and share their information online?
The truth is, we have multiple identities now, right? So I'm Dr. Bennett, and I'm mom, and I'm a wife, and I'm a friend. And it's gotten so much more complicated because now we not only have our non-virtual identities, but we have our virtual identities. There's Facebook Tracy, and there's Twitter Tracy, and there's Pinterest. And our kids are also dividing their identities in many different ways. Now what's confusing is they hang out with different virtual identities based on what platform they're on. So with us, they're their sweet little selves, but on Twitter, they're an entirely different person in an entirely different community with entirely different expectations. And it's very confusing. And I can tell you as a clinician, there's something I've witnessed most recently, and that is the way that kids play with gender. And I haven't seen much in the literature about it, but my hypothesis is that they're role-playing so much in their non-virtual lives, and they're playing with different characteristics like gender, right? So sometimes they're male, sometimes they're female, sometimes they're gender fluid, and sometimes they're non-gender at all. There's all these sociological terms they call it. It blows my mind. I have a terrible time keeping up with it. But what I'm seeing is these role-play games where they really learned how to do this, they're carrying into their regular lives, and it's creating a lot of chaos for families. And I'm really on the fence about how good this is for them. I mean, on the one hand, if you ask the kids, they say it's great for us because it provides creative opportunity to explore and figure out who we are and don't hold us back. It's a new world and you guys don't know what you're talking about. But on the other hand, I'm seeing 13-year-olds that they're having a hard time figuring out what they're gonna wear that day. But then when you make it that much more complicated, that they also have 5 gender roles they can take on that day, it has made a far more complex world. And it really is the Wild West. We don't really know what we're doing. And we're not gonna know for about 10 years, because a lot of what they're creating is changing brain structure. It's changing behavior in a permanent way. So just like the smokers in the 60s started dying of cancer in the 80s, right? We're seeing kids changing brain structure, experimenting with roles, and we're not going to really know what outcome that has for about 10 to 20 years. And I think on the one hand that can be very beneficial, but we really do need to keep our fingers on the pulse of what kind of strain that puts on them, as well as opportunity.
Definitely, and just to piggyback off that, I definitely want to hear from the panel, but I think it's really important that as we talk about things like gender or sexual orientation, that we just kind of keep an inclusive idea about it. So that way we understand that no matter where we are or where our children are, I like to use the term that they are exploring their identities and things like that. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there, because I think it is something that we're in a new frontier about, and I don't want to link it to screen time or technology or devices, because I don't think it has anything to do with that per se, but I do think that when our children are in these different worlds and they're online and things like that, it definitely gives them a little bit of a space to say, I'm okay with being a part of the gender spectrum, I'm okay with being gender fluid. So I just kind of wanted to have that be kind of a something that we know before we move on into technology and things like that.
I do think that their screen time influences who they hang out with and who their influences are. There have been several incidents in the remediated classrooms where girls have been in other chat rooms or online with other girls who may do some certain behavior, like they may cut themselves, and it's a copying behavior. That behavior we have to monitor. I think that's very important.
Around the notion of privacy and students monitoring their own privacy, as human beings we tell stories, and I think oftentimes using stories and case studies, so to speak, with kids makes a huge difference. I think it's a very vulnerable place for adults to put themselves in, to share stories or examples of when they've compromised their own privacy and what the consequences have been. Sharing with students and your children examples of other kids who've made decisions or judgment calls that have resulted in negative consequences is really important. I've found in my career that kids relate to stories. It helps them build empathy and experience through others. And that's one way to manage it, because it's such an abstract concept, privacy, to a young person. And they don't experience it the same way we think of privacy. So making that more as concrete as possible with examples, I have found makes a huge difference.
It does. When I speak to students, I often will pull up websites like Spokeo or White Pages or things like that, where I'm able to show students. Oh, I use my mother-in-law. Is this being filmed, by the way? Okay, hi, honey. Sorry. I always pull up my mother-in-law's profile, and I can see her gender, age, ethnicity, marital status, occupation, level of education, her address, her phone number, maps to her house. I can show who lives in the house with her, and then my favorite part, family lifestyle. And when I show the kids this page with all of this information, they go crazy. All of them, from 4th grade up to, I do this with my college students as well, and they all think, how is this even possible? And everyone always hears I call them the go-to phrases. Don't put it out there if you don't want it out there forever, or don't put anything out there you wouldn't want your grandmother to see, or a billboard on Sunset Boulevard. That doesn't resonate with kids. They don't care, not at all. Because to them, who's gonna go looking into their spam accounts or into their Finstas? Do you know what spam accounts and Finstas are? Okay, so those are their fake Instagram accounts that they have. So they have their regular private Instagram account, and then they have their Finsta that only has 5 or 6 people. That's where all the really good stuff happens. And so they can't imagine that anyone is collecting this information about them. And when I'm able to show them what their own digital tattoo looks like, it starts to resonate a little bit more and explain how, and I call it a digital tattoo rather than a digital footprint, because to me, a footprint, you can kind of wipe it away. A tattoo, much more permanent, very difficult to get rid of. And so it's a matter of getting to them where they're at. And so I love the stories, but when you show them concrete evidence of how all of this information is aggregated and pulled together, it's the first time they really start to understand how little control they have over that information.
I think what we're all saying is it's a multi-pronged approach. Like there's no one size fits all. It's like hitting it from all angles and modeling as adults. How many of us Google ourselves as often as we should? How many of us are managing our own privacy? I think we all logged into not all of us maybe, but many of us, including me, the director of tech, logged into the network here. And it clearly stated you enter at your own risk for the most part. So the modeling that we do as adults and talking through that modeling, I think, or being transparent in our thinking, I should say, is crucial.
And I think, Lori, you actually brought up a really good point, which is when we talk to our children, we have to meet them where they are. A lot of our kids are on social media or using technology to be popular. So saying, what if you get on Billboard? They're like, yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do.
That's what they want.
We really have to realize that, like, I think, you were saying that privacy is different for children. For them, they want to be the next YouTube star. They want to be the next reality TV person because, unfortunately, that's what media has made them feel is the cool thing. So when they're on these devices and when they're on the social media, to them, it's like, well, I have 1,001 followers. I have 1 million followers. I'm like Ashton Kutcher. I'm like so many others. So we have to really meet them where they are about what they see privacy as. To them, privacy is, and I'm saying this from one of my kids, privacy is, whatever people can film or whatever people can find about you. And I was like, where'd you get that from? And it's from like the Real Housewives shows and the shows where reality TV has told them that it's okay to have your private lives filmed. It's okay to have your private life be out there like that. So I think that's a really good point as educators, as professionals, that when we're talking to children about screen time, that we're meeting them where they are. We're not coming from our understanding of privacy and our understanding. We're saying a kid who wants to end up being a YouTube star is probably going to put their whole life on YouTube. Let me help them learn not to do that, things like
Or
that.
let me teach them how to do it in a way where they're safe.
Yes.
And I've worked with lots of kids who do incredibly creative things, and I don't want to stifle their creativity. But if you have a 13-year-old who is a burgeoning YouTube star, you know what? You're probably best by turning off the comments so no one can communicate with that child. It's not necessarily about shutting it all down, but helping them navigate it in a way that makes more sense for them and where they're at right now. I've worked with law enforcement for the last 14 years now. I think it's been about 14 years. And I can tell you that we don't often see cases where a picture of a child was posted on Facebook or they were on YouTube and then a predator comes and gets them. It doesn't work that way. Predators groom children. They connect with them. They make them think that they are their best friend and that they are going to make them famous and that they're going to give them everything they're not getting from their home life or from their friends in real life. And so when we do talk about privacy, we want to make sure that we're talking about personal safety. We're talking about, one of the biggest problems that we have that I see with some of the cases is that it's never a child that comes in that has been victimized where the parent said, I knew exactly what was going on, but this still happened to my child. That's not what happens. It's usually, I had no idea my child was communicating with this person because the child is trying to keep it private. They're trying to control the relationship so that the parent doesn't take it away. And one of the best things that I ever learned from, I love saying his name, Agent Randall Devine, because Agent Devine is like the best FBI agent name of all time, is he always says, you want to be on team child and not team trouble. You want children to know that if someone's important to them, they're important to you too, no matter how they met them. Whether it was at school, on the soccer field, at church, at temple, or online in Clash of Clans, Minecraft, or World of Warcraft. And that's really where we need to kind of break down those walls of privacy, that they don't want to control those kinds of things on their own.
And so when we're looking at the future of technology, because we all know that technology is only going to advance, it's not going to go backwards, what do you feel in terms of productive screen time, because that's going to evolve too, right? What do you guys feel is the future of this idea of productive screen time and having screens and devices in our lives? What would you say is the future of it, and how can we kind of get ready for it, if that makes sense?
Well, the future for my population is going to be with Google Glasses. Absolutely. They're learning to tell emotions. They're learning to get verbal feedback. The glasses go in color. Different colors are different emotions. It's an amazing technology. Also in trackable devices where the kids can be followed and the parents can track where the kids are. That's definitely part of the future.
And that's the children who...
Children on the spectrum. or children with learning disabilities, or children who just are lost in the world.
Well, and if anybody's a science fiction nerd like I am, I mean, the truth is, we are cyborgs now, right? We have outsourced our brains in so many ways. I mean, how many of you can tell us what your family's phone numbers are? Right? I mean, keeping track of phone numbers, just holding our memories, accessing information. We're truly integrated. We're already there. It's very difficult to do our jobs every day without our screens. And, you know, as a result, our capacity is limitless. I mean, just watching the creativity of my university students, you know, no longer do I only just assign a paper. Now, instead of a paper, they can also do a video, or they, you know, or they can do a discussion group online. They check their Blackboard. I mean, it's just really made, it reaches people in places that they've never before accessed. Because maybe I had a burgeoning video producer in my classes before, but they never had that opportunity to develop themselves. So I really think it's expanding our brains to new horizons in a beautiful way. Even though as parents we're talking about children, you know, we're really keeping a close eye on them. But I'm also seeing them develop into human beings that I'm very proud of.
My response would be, the future is here, and I think technology itself is going to evolve, but I think what's just as, if not more interesting, is how our culture is evolving. So I think kind of a cultural, social, intellectual Darwinism is going on, where in 5 or 10 years, we're talking about this because we're grappling with issues that people probably grappled with when the car was in, I mean, it's not the best comparison.
It's a great analogy.
So in 10, 20, 50 years, this won't be the conversation. Our society, our culture, who we are as human beings would have evolved in such a way that that's the future, how we relate to each other across borders, cross culture. I think that's where twists and turns are going to start happening. We're already seeing it happening. So where we've been used to living in kind of cloistered communities, what is it like now to truly be a global citizen, a term that we're all using, but that's going to take on a completely different meaning in a few years. So I think the future is less about the technology, because that's going to evolve. Tomorrow there's going to be something we didn't know about today. But more, who are we as human beings relating to each other with this evolution going on?
So in 2004, Thomas Friedman wrote a book called The World is Flat. I don't know if anyone read this book, but it was fantastic. And we are now where he talked about. It is where we are. It's about creating a space where our global economy functions in a way where everybody is on a level playing field in that space. And we're here now. Where I see it going is I see virtual reality, augmented reality, and holograms. I can't wait to be a hologram. I'm very excited about that day when somebody can swipe up on their phone and I will be standing right next to them. All of these things, though, that are happening, I truly believe enhance our relationships. I don't think it tears it apart. I know that there are still a lot of people who believe that young people are not capable of talking to each other face to face. I don't see that. I work with tens of thousands of teens every year, and I'm telling you, when I walk into the room, they are not the ones that are all individually sitting there doing that. That's the adults. The kids are showing each other things. They are talking about what it is they're seeing. They're very social creatures. And as we move into a space where social media is turning into live streaming, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but even with Musical.ly right now, you live stream what it is you're doing. It's happening in real time. So we are able to connect with people in real-time ways that we couldn't before. I have a 24-year-old who went off to Argentina over the summer, and I was absolutely devastated that she went off to Argentina for the entire summer, and we FaceTimed almost every day. And for me, that continues to enhance my relationships.
For the immediate future, not looking quite so far down, from my perspective, I feel like all of this fear with social media, with the apps, with I read a lot about parents, we can never get ahead of what our kids are doing. We're always going to be condemned to be a few steps behind. They're always going to outsmart us. We're destined to lose in terms of keeping them safe. All of this, I feel, what my hope is that the future is that parents lose a little bit of this fear, and that we realize, and I know this sounds cliche, but it's the truth, it just comes back to our parenting and how we talk to our kids. I hope that we can lose a little bit of the fear of, there was a panel earlier today with 5 high school kids talking about how they use Snapchat. And I was so relieved they were the nicest kids, you know, and I felt like going home to my kids and saying, okay, you can be on Snapchat.
When they're 13.
Yeah, yes.
Not
I feel like social media isn't the thing that we need to fear. We needed to bring it back to our parenting, and I feel like if we can calm some of this noise out there and bring it back to that, I think everyone will benefit, parents and kids.
And I think you guys all made a kind of a common theme here, which is this idea that technology is here to stay. It's more about how we adapt and how we guide and how we teach, as opposed to trying to shut down the technology. Again, Google Glass is coming, virtual reality is coming. Google has like the visor and everything already. It's here. So it's more so about, okay, this is here. It's not going anywhere. How do we, as educators, as experts, as parents, really guide our children to move forward? And how do we guide ourselves? Because we're also in the world with our kids and we're trying to learn how to do all this stuff too. So I feel like that's that common thread here, that is this idea that technology isn't going to be the behemoth that we have to control, but it's more so ourselves and how we interact. So I know we have a few more minutes, and I want to give you guys just kind of some time to say, give your best piece of advice to the educators and the parents that are out here, for how do we really get serious and intentional about the screen time in our homes and in our lives? How do we do that? What's your best piece of advice or your best nugget that you want people to take from here?
I'll start because mine is going to be kind of easy and light. Mine is play with your kids, find an app that you love. Mine is Word Bubbles. I can play that till I'm blue in the face with my kids, and they love it. We were hanging out by a pool this summer, and we played with 2 other kids. There was 4 of us laughing and having so much fun. And I know I could tell my kids were relieved that I wasn't saying no. We were having fun because I found something that that wasn't excruciating to me. I was stimulated, I was having a blast. My kids were like, Mom, you're good at words. Yeah, I'm good at something. But they were good too, and we found a common ground. So that would be my advice. If you're a teacher or a parent, both, find something that you're truly passionate about, that you truly love, that your kids do too. Don't fake it. I tried to do Minecraft. I couldn't. But Word Bubbles, I'm in.
Sure. Get a charging station and get your devices on that charging station when you're not using them. Best thing I have ever done in my house. It is, because the charging station lives in the kitchen, and it's a great reminder that there's a time and a place for everything, and when you're in the middle of one of these, you shouldn't also be doing one of these. The charging station also helps, keep all the devices from getting lost, all the cords and cables stay in one place, and it gets the devices out of places where they shouldn't be, like in the bedroom, and they shouldn't be. This is for a variety of reasons. We know that the EMF, they impede sleep. We know that we don't get off of our devices at night. We know that if you are in a room with somebody else, your significant other, that you two sitting side by side doing this is not being together. And the charging station is just a good reminder for all of us to kind of live in a space where we're living in the present.
Mine would be let who you are as a human being drive your purpose, passion, and judgment with technology. So I cannot emphasize that enough. And that's true for anything in life. So if you want to connect to a family member, is the most efficient way to do it using technology or to set a dinner date? So again, let who you are in this world drive your use of anything, be it a technology or be it a piece of paper and a pen.
I would say there's actually 2 things that keep my clients healthy and that I really try to bring the families to. One is a position of mindfulness. So they're in the present, they're not worried about their future, they're not beating themselves up over the past. So parents, being with their kids in the present and teaching them how to be at peace with that instead of anxiously grabbing a screen. But connected to that is that what we all really need is to feel loved. We need to feel loved. And if the child's online collecting likes all the time, it may be that we're overtasked and we're not taking that time out that they need to really not just police them, but value them for having worth, not by their grades, not by how good of a soccer, volleyball, or football player they are, but just that they're worthy of love just because they are. And I think we sometimes lose track of that. And once a child feels loved, they do a great job. I always think I'm going to get fired by teenagers. I've been in practice 20 years, and I've had this fear for 20 years. Because they come in trouble, and I tell the parents, okay, strip it down. you know, we gotta pull everything away and then start giving it back. And you'd think they'd be like, we're firing Dr. Bennett, she's ruining our life because she's gonna take everything away. But the truth is, I've not been fired ever from a teenager because that's what they want. They really want connection. They want to be loved. They want the parents to see them and to spend time with them while they tell us we're idiots and we don't know anything, but they still love us.
Yes.
So that's my answer.
Yeah, it really is about connection and relationship. Everything is about relationship. It comes back to that. It comes back to the family. It comes back to the love. It comes back to being in their space. You may have technology driving that initial connection, then go for the connection in person. Hug your children, love your kids. I've never been fired either.
So we have a few more minutes for questions, so if anyone has like maybe like 1 or 2 questions, we have this wonderful panel up here. Go ahead, please like ask a question, get some feedback. If there's something you're currently dealing with you'd like to kind of get a new perspective on, go ahead.
We deal with productive screen time in the classroom. When students are productive, they're engaged.
Yes.
They can lose focus very quickly, they're distracted, they're off task. What's the secret sauce for engaging students to be productive with screen time?
So I go through 8 points of classroom management when I work with faculty on this issue, and what it really comes down to is using the technology with a purpose, and using it for the right amount of time. So creating certain language. Usually what I do is I talk about red light, yellow light, green light, which actually works very well even with high school students. Red light means stop whatever it is you're doing, whether you're typing on a device or writing with a pencil. Hands up, look forward. Yellow light is keep your ears open but keep going, and green light is it's a free-for-all organized chaos. But you gotta be okay with organized chaos in a classroom when it comes to technology. We can't teach the same old way and expect the students to stay on task with the technology in front of them. If you put the device in front of them and you want them to stay engaged in something, then they have to have a time limit to actually get it done, and the time limit needs to be appropriate so that you are able to do that. And then it's a red light moment where they, shut it, turn it over, whatever it is, so that they can reconnect again. And when you also as the teacher walk around the classroom, that's also a very big help. You can't sit up at the front of the room anymore and expect that your students are going to just stay with you. You also have to think about how you as the educator are presenting your notes. One of the things that I often find with teachers is when they get technology, they take all of their lesson plans, turn them into PowerPoints, put every single sentence on the PowerPoint slide itself, and so now the students just wait for you to load them up to the LMS and they don't need to take notes anymore. And so it's about, if you want them to be fully engaged, you have to treat it as a tool, treat it as a pen and a paper, and not as something that they can substitute for that pen and paper, but then do 12 other things.
And David, I know you know this because we work together, but in addition to everything that was just shared, knowing what interests your students. So how many people in the room are familiar with design thinking? Okay, so if you are, you know that to me the most important step in design thinking is empathy and getting to know your clients, and in this case our students, and that which would interest our kids. So taking time to approach instruction from that, and that's something my teachers and I would talk about all of the time. That does not mean you depart from the standards. Obviously we have standards we need to master in each grade, but there are multiple pathways to the standards, and those pathways should include student interest points. And going back to what you were sharing about teachers, professional development, I think I'm getting too in the weeds, but as a leader of teachers, if we're expecting them to engage students, shouldn't we engage them when they're in professional development? Their professional development should not look that differently from what instruction in the classroom looks like. Just as parents, we should model and engage in that which we want our kids to engage in. So in terms of engagement, looking at it from the kids' point of view and taking it from there, I think is critical.
Want to say something?
I would say that the best classrooms I've seen have some project going on at the same time they have a computer open. So if they're building a volcano, they're also reporting and dialoguing about the volcano with each other, with their classmates, with their teammates. And it does look like organized chaos, and it does work. and their grades are higher and they can explain it. So when the principal walks in, you can give them the standards. The kids can give them the standards. It's amazing. Something is being done. Education is happening.
Great question.
We have time for maybe one more.
Any apps you recommend, or what's advice for kids who do have trouble being productive with their screen times, to shut out? Do we just go to airplane mode? Do we
Stay focused and the self-control app.
Yeah.
The kids love those two apps. Different than something like Forcefield, where it's parent-controlled. Stay Focused, which is a plug-in to Google Chrome, and the Self-Control app, which was actually developed by a student at Harvard Westlake in 2004. And it just became available for iOS devices as well. And they get to turn it on, and they get to determine how long to keep it on. All the high school students I know that use it love it, unless their siblings get a hold of their devices and turn it off for 3 days, and then it's kind of a problem. But other than that, it works great.
I think a plug for a document I meant to include in one of my responses. Common Sense Media's latest report, Common Sense Consensus. We've been talking about screen time. If you're not familiar with that report and you're a parent or an educator, I could have read that thing all night. I know I'm geeky about this stuff, but you learn so much about our youngsters' perspective on the use of screen time. It gives data, but it also gives perspective, and it's a great resource. Common Sense Media Consensus, their latest report. You know that one? Excellent.
And I'll just piggyback on that. Common Sense Media is an amazing site in general. Just for they review apps, they review movies, they review all kinds of things, and they even have kid reviews for a lot of things too, which I think is really cool. So they have the adult reviews and they also have the kid reviews. So if you're not someone who is familiar with that, which most of us are because we're educators and professionals, but if you're not, definitely it is something that I constantly refer my parents to as well when they're like, "What is this about?" I'm like, "Hey, this is something that you can use." So I definitely piggyback off of Common Sense Media.
So after school time, they've done all these activities, they've done their homework, they're done. And how long is good use of iPad playtime after all of that stuff?
So they're
Elementary school, I'm
Sure.
tonight.
Okay. So just very quick background. When the American Academy of Pediatrics came out 10, 15 years ago and said 2 hours of screen time per day, and then came out 6 weeks later and said, wait, that doesn't include schoolwork. That didn't sit well. And so when I talked to my children's pediatrician, what I found out is it was rooted in an obesity study and not a technology study. Okay, I don't know if any of you knew that, but it was an obesity study, which basically says the more kids sit, the bigger they get. So if we're going to follow that philosophy, then that needs to include them sitting in a situation like this in the classroom while they're reading and doing all sorts of other things. So the guideline now has more to do with active time versus sedentary time. And so that's what you want to look at. Our kids need to be more active than they are sitting around. They need to exercise all parts of their body and brain. So reading is incredibly important because it lights up that hippocampus very quickly. It's very engaging for them. Even those who don't love to read, still we find that when you look at a functional MRI, their brains are engaged. So they need to exercise their bodies. Kids need approximately 1 hour of hard exercise per day. They need to also make sure they get to sleep on time. So what I usually do is I work backwards. So I say, all right, if this is when your bedtime is, in order for you to get, for elementary age students, it's between 10 and 11 hours, middle school, 9.25 hours, high school, it's like 8 hours. If you need that much sleep, let's work backwards. You need to eat dinner, you need to do your homework, you need to do your sports activities and your music lessons and everything else, and then you can kind of see how much screen time is really appropriate. On the weekends, they want to sit and watch a 2-hour movie, fantastic, but then they need to move for at least 3 hours. Okay?
And does anyone else have anything else to say? That was really thorough. I really appreciate that. What I will piggyback on too is I think one of the things that's really important, and I think all of you guys on the panel have said it, but it's also really get to know your child. So whether that be in the classroom or at home. So I know like for someone who works with kids on the autism spectrum, their attention spans are a lot different than someone who may be typically developing. So an atypical developing kid may need different allowances versus a typically developing kid. And I think, Laura, you were talking about the idea of not for all of us sitting here they're hunched over, well, kids do that too. Kids sit in their classrooms hunched over, whether it's on the computer or they're looking at the blackboard. Like, so we need to also think about this idea that no matter where they're getting screen time or not, that active part should be also part of their education. Like, do they get to stand up in the middle of their, the lecture? Do they get to kind of jump around and get their wiggles out in the middle of a lecture, especially for elementary school kids who are still, they still want to play. They still want to have their recess and things like that. So I think it's for me, I think the idea of how much time should they get should really be about who this kid is. There's some kids who are really, they need to be active, and you can see decreases in their mood when they're not. And there's some kids who are a little bit more, like they don't need to be as active, so they can still have maybe more screen time. Again, I'm just being really arbitrary here, but I think outside of the recommended times, I think we also really need to look at our kids and say, who are they and what do they need? So that's just my idea. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up because we are at the 2:30 mark. So I want to say, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you guys for your great questions and your attentiveness. Give a round of